Hey there guys, so I just got done uploading my top 10 worst movies of 2018 if you guys want to check that one out. And I figured I'd get a start on my top 10 best movies of 2018. Now, it took me a little bit longer than I thought it would to compose this list because there was actually quite a few movies I did like last year, despite there being so many I didn't like. There was also quite a few that I did like. And there was a few movies that I wanted to add to this list, but there just wasn't enough space because this is top 10. So let's get started. So, coming in at number 10 is an animated movie from Disney Pixar, Coco. I saw this movie, back when it came out, saw it at the cinema. Really, really gorgeous looking animation, I have to say. Now, this movie is about a young boy in Mexico. Who travels over to the afterworld to find his long lost grandfather and carry on his legacy. And it's set during the Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico. And I just have to say that the thing that I remember standing out so much about this movie is the unique animation. Like, this movie is just really good looking. You get the boy, he's in the regular world, and you've got regular character models and whatnot. But then he goes over to the land of the dead where his ancestors are seeking out his grandfather, and everybody's a skeleton, but they still move around and walk and talk and act as if they're alive and stuff. And the animation is really good fun, but it's goofy, but in a good way. I like the way this movie looks. That's one thing that you can always count on Pixar. Like, one thing that they can always lay claim to is that they're excellent when it comes to animation. A really nice looking movie. It is a real heartwarming story. I really did feel for the characters. It's one of them movies that kind of tugs on your heartstrings a little bit, but in a good way. It's not overbearing. It's a movie that I did kind of want to watch again, and it's a movie that I think is good as a family movie. So yeah, number 10, Coco. Coming in at number 9 is a movie that absolutely blew me away with how gorgeous it looked, and that is the movie Alpha. Now, this movie is set in ancient Europe, and it tells the story of, supposedly, a rough idea of the story of how man and wolf came to coexist, and how dog became man's best friend. And it tells the story of a young man who's out on his first hunt with his tribe. He's the son of a chief. He ends up getting separated from his tribe and is presumed dead. And meanwhile, a wolf is also separated from its pack. These two, one thing leads to another, and these two find each other, and they end up developing a bond, and they end up keeping each other alive, and they end up relying on each other. This movie was absolutely fantastic. I loved this movie. One of the things that concerned me about the movie going into it was I felt that it would have been a little bit too CGI heavy, because obviously they have to use CGI effects to try and emulate a wolf from ancient Europe. But I have to be honest, the CGI worked in this movie. It really did. The animation and the digital effects surrounding the wolf, and practical effects that they use in the movie. There are actually, like, practical dogs at times in the movie, and the acting is really good. It's in a foreign language, but it has subtitles. But it's a really well acted movie. There's some really cool action scenes. There's some beautiful, gorgeous scenery. I just wanted to go there, man. It just looked where they were filming this movie just looked so beautiful. And yeah, it was just a really beautiful movie. I really enjoyed it, man. I really liked Alpha. I actually considered putting it higher on the list, but like I said, it was difficult making this list because there were a lot of movies I liked. So moving on. So coming in at number 8 is the movie Stan and Ollie. Now, this movie stars John C. Reilly and Steve Coogan, and it's a biopic about the very popular comedy duo Stan and Ollie. Now, I did briefly mention this in my top 10 worst movies of the year when I mentioned the movie Holmes and Watson, which also starred John C. Reilly, and Steve Coogan was actually in that movie too. He actually cameoed in that movie, and I mentioned how there was a review that I saw in the comments section for that movie saying that Stan and Ollie is a movie about a aging comedy duo who have seen better days, whereas Holmes and Watson simply stars one. And I thought that was a great way to sum up that movie. But unlike Holmes and Watson, this movie, Stan and Ollie, is actually a really well acted movie. It's actually got a fairly serious tone, despite being surprisingly funny. Most of the humor in the movie comes from Steve Coogan and his one-liners. Steve Coogan's a very funny guy, man. Like I never knew before this movie going into it just how funny he is. But the jokes he comes out with, as well as some of the physical comedy in the movie, I thought was really impressive. And it's really a, kind of a depiction of what their relationship was like. More about, it's more like that than about how Stan and Ollie, came to be, how they met, and how they got famous. It's not really about that. It's more about the latter part of their career and their friendship and their relationship together. And it was really well acted. And John C. Reilly was fantastic as Ollie. I just thought that it was a really heartwarming story. I enjoyed it, and yeah, one of the best movies of the year. Really liked it. It was also surprisingly funny, as I said. So moving on to number 7, we have Incredibles 2, another Pixar movie. Now, I was a huge, huge fan of the first movie when I was a child. I loved the first Incredibles, and I actually plan to watch it again soon because it's one of my favorite Pixar animation movies when I was a child, and it's just a really, really fun superhero movie with a lot of action and some life lessons about family and morals and whatnot. And this was, I have to say, a fairly decent sequel. It was a pretty solid sequel, if I'm being honest. I was worried that the sequel wouldn't really live up to the original, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't really expect it to, but as a sequel, they did a fantastic job, I have to say. I really did enjoy it. The animation this time looks even better. You can really tell that this is a really, really high budget animation movie. The voice acting is spectacular. They bring back the original cast, people like Samuel L. Jackson and Holly Hunter and whatnot. They're all back to do this movie. I believe the original director, Brad Bird, who's a very, very talented animation director. He also directed Ratatouille and stuff like that, and the first movie of The Incredibles. I believe he also directed this movie. Really good movie, The Incredibles 2. I enjoyed it. Moving on to number 6, we have Johnny English Strikes Again. Now, I absolutely love Johnny English, man. I love every one of the movies. The first movie was one that really took me by surprise several years ago. The second movie, Johnny English Reborn, I think is an underrated classic. That movie didn't do very well critically, but I actually think it was better than the first movie. And this movie, Johnny English Strikes Again, it's amazing how they're able to take Rowan Atkinson, a guy who's been around for God knows how many years, man. This guy's been in so many comedies over the years, on both TV and on the big screen. He's one of the most charismatic comedians out there. He's one of these people who is just an absolute master at physical comedy. He can take an everyday situation like drinking a martini or eating some seafood or something like that. If you guys have ever seen any of his movies, he can take small everyday life situations and he can turn them into comedy moments. He can make them hilarious. If you guys have never seen Mr. Bean, like he does it in that. He's just able to take everyday, regular tasks and just somehow make them funny. He's just one of these people who's just a master at physical comedy. And the physical comedy in this Johnny English movie is excellent. The acting is pretty good. Boff, who was his sidekick from the first movie, comes back to reprise his role. Really good chemistry between the two of them. Olga Kulinenko was in this movie. You remember the woman from Hitman and whatnot. She's in this movie. She plays like this Russian secret agent chick. She was quite interesting in the movie. She did a good job. Everybody in this movie, one of the things I liked about it is everybody seemed to enjoy their role. They all seemed to have very high energy, and the cast seemed to just love what they were doing. Okay, the villain in the movie, he's like this, billionaire, like tech geek who wants to take over the world using data and whatnot. And you've got this guy Johnny English, who's an old man, who's a real old school secret agent who wants to bring him down using old school and traditional tactics. And I just thought this was a blast. I love this movie, man. One of my favorite comedies of the year. Really, really good movie. Johnny English Strikes Again. And again, another underrated movie, I have to say. Really enjoyed it. So moving on to number 5, and this is one that I had to think about. I actually did planned to put this a little bit higher, but again, there were just other movies that I felt I enjoyed more. But this is a movie that certainly, out of all the movies on this list, this movie definitely took me by surprise more than the others, and that is Aquaman. Guys, if you had told me a few years ago that an Aquaman movie, would be better than a fucking Justice League movie, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said, no way. But it was. The Aquaman movie turned out to be one of DC's best, and one of DC's best movies in years. This movie had some tremendous action sequences, really nice wide shots. I think that Jason Momoa looked the part, he sounded the part. His acting in the movie was charismatic, he was very energetic. He seemed to really enjoy the role. The underwater special effects, like with the CGI that they had, and even the costumes, this movie looked amazing, and you can tell that DC knew they had to up their game, because in recent years they have been terrible. Movies like Justice League and Batman vs Superman and all the crap that DC was churning out over the years, they had to really, pull out something really special with this movie. This movie really had to be special. It did, and it was. This movie was fantastic. Really enjoyed Aquaman. I don't even know what else to say. If you guys want to know what I thought of it, just check out my review. Check out my review for Aquaman. I broke the movie down and the reasons why I like it so much. Just a really, really fun movie, man. Really enjoyed it. Solid movie, Aquaman. It works as both a comic book movie and as an action movie. That's what I will say about it. Really good. Moving on to number 3, and again, I had to think about this one. It's just another one which I did think about putting higher, but upon rewatching the movie, I still really like the movie. I think it's a solid comic book movie. But there's just a couple more movies which a couple more movies which I thought deserved a higher place on the list, and that is Avengers: Infinity War. I had a blast watching Avengers: Infinity War. I saw it like 4 times in the cinema. I'm not even kidding. It was just such a good looking, such a fun, such a colourful, such a energetic, comic book action flick, right? Great superhero movie, really enjoyed it. I thought that Josh Brolin absolutely killed it as Thanos. I thought he did a great job as Thanos, and I'm rooting for him to kick Brie Larson's ass when they meet in in the final Avengers movie. I hope he chokes that bitch out, I really do. Without getting too controversial, but yeah, I thought that he was great as Thanos. I thought Thor was absolutely badass in this movie. I thought the big fight scene towards the end in Wakanda was awesome. And I didn't even like the Black Panther movie. You notice that that's not on this list, but I thought that the fight scene in Wakanda with the characters from Black Panther here was really impressive. And I just had a blast watching it. What more can I really say about Avengers: Infinity War? The problem I have with it, though, and as much as I enjoyed this movie, the problem I had with it is I don't really hold out much hope for the future of this series because of all the liberal SJW crap that we're hearing from Disney, all the shit from Brie Larson, and how they're trying to put a downer on these superhero movies. They're trying to make us, us males feel guilty for watching these movies and shit. They're telling us that this shit isn't for us. It's for feminists and it's for SJWs and that. Well, let the SJWs and the cucks have their movies, because until they sort their shit out, I'm not buying another ticket to see a Marvel movie until they pack it in with the rhetoric. So I like Avengers: Infinity War. Again, I saw it multiple times at the cinema, but they're gonna lose business if they keep with the rhetoric that is coming out of their mouths, man. Coming in at number 3, another movie which completely shocked me with how much I liked it, Searching. Now, Searching is a movie that takes a little bit of getting used to, because this whole entire movie is shown from the perspective of cameras on, say, a computer or a handheld mobile device and stuff like that. Whenever there's one of them, in the shot, whenever there's one of them in the vicinity, that's the perspective that you'll get on this movie. Basically, the plot of this movie is a young woman goes missing. She goes away for the night, and her father falls asleep. She tries to call him a few times. He realizes he's got some missed calls, and then all of a sudden she disappears. She vanishes off the face of the earth, and the whole movie is about her dad, in association with the police and whatnot, trying to find her. That's why it's called Searching. And he basically goes through all her social media, does a lot of detective work. And one of the things about this movie that I think was really fantastic is how it depicted the behaviors of certain people on social media. Because at the start of the movie, like, there are certain people who knew this girl but didn't really give a shit about her. They were like, nah, she wasn't really my friend, I just knew her. But then when the girl goes missing, and then when the story goes viral, these same people are like, oh, she was my best friend, I feel so sad, and, trying to get attention off it. And there's also a lot of like theories that come out. People think that the dad might have had something to do with it, and it really does portray accurately the problems with social media, the severe issues and toxicity of social media on young people's lives and on everybody's lives, really. So really enjoyed this movie. Gave it real solid. I would give. I didn't actually review this movie, but I would give it a real solid score if I were to review it. I may actually review it one day. Second movie on this list, number 2. Again, another one I had to think about. I actually did consider maybe putting this number 1 because of how much I enjoyed this movie. Now, I've got a review for this movie coming, and that'll be uploaded either tomorrow or the day after. And that is the movie The Commuter, starring Liam Neeson. I had an absolute blast with this movie. I actually think that this movie is Liam Neeson's best movie in a long time. It's very similar to a previous movie of his. It's very similar to the movie Non-Stop. If you guys have ever seen the movie Non-Stop, it's sort of an action thriller with Liam Neeson. And this movie has a similar type of plot and a similar type of atmosphere and has a similar type of tone. However, instead of taking place on a plane, it takes place on a train. And I really enjoyed the setting. It's one of them movies that's just a thrill ride. You feel as if you were on that journey with him. Everything you see in this movie is shown basically from Liam Neeson's perspective. You travel this journey with him, and I really think that the cinematography and the overall choreography of this movie was brilliant. The action sequences were all very nice and competently filmed. There's no bullshit shaky cam or CGI or nonsense quick cuts or disorienting motion like there was in movies like Robin Hood last year, or any of the Taken sequels directed by Olivia Megaton with Liam Neeson. There was none of that disorienting shit in this movie. This movie was well filmed, and it's a really, really, really intense and thrilling action movie with some twists and turns along the way. So I would really recommend The Commuter. I'm going to post my review for it in a couple of days, like I said, so stay tuned for that if you want to see it. But yeah, number 2, The Commuter. Coming in at number 1, it was, when I was composing this list and I was thinking of what should be number 1, this one was a high favorite from the beginning. This is one that I always, it had to be at least in the top 3, and that is Mission Impossible Fallout. For those of you who didn't see my review for Mission Impossible Fallout, let me just sum up this movie by saying this movie, it was just amazing. Like, this movie, the action sequences and the stunt work in this movie, this movie should definitely have gotten an Oscar for its stunt work, man. Tom Cruise and the other guy in the movie here, Henry Cavill, the stunts involving those two, I mean, jumping off rooftops, jumping out of windows, real practical effects, no bullshit CGI, no shaky cam. Like I said, lots of wide shots, just like in The Commuter and in Aquaman. The action sequences were well filmed. There's one particular fight scene where Henry Cavill and Tom Cruise take on this guy in a bathroom, and it's like this pristine, white, clean bathroom without a speck of dust. It's just clean. And then as soon as they start fighting, they absolutely wreck the place. And it's all practical effects. It's all real. They actually do these things. And I just thought the stunt work was brilliant. And everybody in the movie looked the part. Henry Cavill, really is badass in this movie. This is one of his best performances by far. One of Tom Cruise's best performances by far, certainly in terms of stunt work. These guys were so committed to this movie. What I loved about this movie was just how much effort went into it. you know, jumping out of aeroplanes in the middle of a storm and stuff, and, you know, flying an actual helicopter with practical explosions. Like, it's the type of shit you don't see nowadays in movies. This movie, everything was practical, everything was realistic, and it was a blast. Really, really fun movie. And I would have to give this the top spot on this list just based on how much effort was put into the movie. I really do. A really, really great movie. So that's my top 10 best movies of 2018. Now, I do have some honorable mentions. There were a few other movies I wanted to talk about. First of all, there was the movie The Meg, starring Jason Statham. I reviewed that movie on my channel if you want to check it out. It was a good movie, a decent creature feature. However, I didn't quite think it was good enough to be in the top 10. I just thought it was an honorable mention, a movie I enjoyed. There was also um, the movie Overlord, starring John Boyega. It was produced by J.J. Abrams. I saw that one at the cinema. Didn't review it, but I watched it and I enjoyed it. It was a real intense sort of horror slash thriller set in World War II, and there was some quite cool practical effects in the movie. It was quite a dark toned movie. Some decent action sequences. It was quite thrilling. You know, it's a decent movie. I enjoyed it. You know, the acting was top notch as well in that movie. Um, there was also the movie Patrick, which I saw, which is a little movie about a dog, a pug that gets adopted by the I believe it's the is it the granddaughter or the grandniece of its owner, and she adopts the dog. And I thought that was quite a sweet family movie. I really did enjoy it. I reviewed that one as well. If you want to check out my review, there was also if any of you guys are into musicals, there was the movie Mamma Mia 2. I thought that was decent. You know, I watched that with my girlfriend. You know, she really enjoys musicals, and yeah, that was a decent musical if you're into that sort of thing. Um, there was the movie Skyscraper with Dwayne Johnson. I didn't think was that bad. I thought that movie was okay. It got panned critically, but I didn't think it was that bad. I'm sure there was more, and they'll come to me, and I might actually post in the description section some other honourable mentions if I think of them. But either way, that's my top 10 list. Let me know what you guys think, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks for watching, and God bless.